Hello, I'm Dylan,
I'm Kiyan.
and this is Triple Play, that podcast where film is extra, because this time/month we watched the Spider-Man trilogy.
Right, with a very obtuse intro. Anyway, written by David Kopp, I think it's Kopp, Alvin Sargent, Sam Raimi, and Ivan Raimi.
They were all directed by Sam Raimi, which is really convenient, and produced by some combination of Laura Ziskin, Ian Bryce, Avi Arad, and Grant Curtis.
And released in 2002, 2004, and 2007.
Yeah, so the Spider-Man trilogy. Obviously the quintessential movie trilogy that we just had to do for this podcast, right?
So not only our most recent trilogy that we've watched, but also our first superhero trilogy. I mean, once we get through a lot of the trilogies we're planning on watching, we're going to get to a lot more superhero trilogies because there are a lot more superhero trilogies, so...
Yeah, the thing about superhero movies is that you can just keep ripping things from the comics and keep writing more and more sequels based on the increasingly convoluted world that they create.
Yep, superhero comics are pretty complex. And
yeah,
since we normally start with our experience with the trilogy or whatever, I guess I can just say that I'm not into superheroes that much.
Just not at all?
Well, I mean... No, not really. I mean, I watched the first Spider-Man movie as a kid, and that's pretty much it. I've watched some of the Batman stuff. I watched the Batman cartoon and the Justice League cartoon as a kid, like, occasionally, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I don't watch superhero films regularly. I mean, I've been following the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it's weird because my favorite films from that universe are the films that aren't superhero films first. They're like another film first. Like Ant-Man was a heist film first and a superhero film second. You know, things like that. But anyway, I've not seen any of the Spider-Man films before this, except I tried to watch the first one when I was pretty young. I was like 8 or 9 maybe, and it got to the really weird transformation scene where his DNA is transforming, and I was like, this is too weird for me. Also kind of terrifying when you're like 10 years old, so...
But you knew the Spider-Man story, right? Like, everyone knows the Spider-Man story. He gets bitten by the spider.
I mean, I knew 2 minutes later when my dad was like, so he got bit by a spider, now he gets turned into Spider-Man.
Oh.
Yeah, that was the first time I found out who Spider-Man was.
Huh.
But I didn't watch the film. I noped out after the weird transformation scene. So we went into this without knowing anything.
Right, and in case you couldn't already tell, we're not like experts on Spider-Man or Marvel or superheroes, so don't expect us to be.
No.
We never claim to be experts on anything.
No, we merely gather information and present it in an easy to digest format.
Or so we think. Anyway.
Way to undermine that. So, I guess we'll start with a brief intro to how Spider-Man originated. And by brief, I mean like 3 sentences.
He was created by the guy who created pretty much every superhero you probably know from Marvel. Stan Lee. No, that's actually not true. There's plenty of superheroes not created by him.
Are they well known, though?
Well, all the DC superheroes.
Well, yeah, okay, so all the well-known Marvel heroes, then, I guess. He's basically the modern-day founder of Marvel.
He did all the super popular ones. I'm sure there are plenty of others not created by him. But he did Spider-Man, X-Men, Thor,
Iron Man,
Fantastic Four.
The Hulk? Did he do Hulk?
I think so.
Basically, if you think of one, there's like a good chance that it was made by Stan Lee.
Right. He's not dead yet. There's a new rumor pretty much every week that Stan Lee is dead, but no, he's in his 90s. Anyway, he
saw like a fly and thought it would be cool if there was a superhero who could climb on walls, so he started just running through insect names until he got to Spider-Man and thought it was cool.
Yeah.
And there you go. I'm not even exaggerating. That is how Spider-Man was created.
Yep.
So the comic was created in the 50s?
63.
63?
63 was the first one.
They made a film of it in...
68 or 69, I think.
Yeah, pretty soon. Wasn't that well known. Still isn't that well known. Kind of just exists.
But there were plenty of cartoons over the years. There's many Spider-Man cartoons, actually.
Yeah, Spider-Man is actually one of the more popular Marvel heroes, I guess. Because
I think he's the most popular.
Yeah, probably because he's relatable to the people who... like, the audience that comic books is catering to It's kind of the age that Peter Parker
Nerds.
is. He's like the everyman hero, basically.
No, I think I'm more like Bruce Wayne, personally. You know, super rich and powerful. No.
Super smart. You own your own corporation. You were orphaned from a young age. Completely relatable.
No, well, Peter Parker is actually orphaned too, but...
Yeah, but he lives with his loving uncle and aunt, whereas Bruce Wayne lives with his
Alfred.
butler. It's like Harry Osborn.
Anyway,
So Marvel was going bankrupt in the 80s, 70s and 80s, and they decided to sell the film rights to a lot of their characters, and one of them was Spider-Man. They sold the film rights, to some sort of indie company, not one of the big ones known now, and I don't even think it's known at all because I think it went bankrupt pretty soon after. They spent $250,000 for the rights. They tried to get a script going, but then they were going bankrupt, so they sold the rights even further. They sold the TV rights to Columbia, the movie rights to someone else, and then it was all just an all mess, so all the rights were all over the place.
Eventually, through a long string of complications, Sony secured the rights to Spider-Man movies. So
Yeah,
that's
they
how
all
this
ended up
trilogy...
suing each other. The one that owned the TV rights sued for the movie rights, and the one that owned the movie rights sued for the TV rights, and Marvel sued all three of them because they thought that the sale was illegal.
MGM was the other big name in this battle.
And I think
MGM and Sony.
there was also some talking going on in the early 2000s. I'm not going to go too into detail, but MGM had acquired, or Sony had acquired the rights to one James Bond novel, Thunderball, because of a long and complicated legal dispute between Kevin McElroy and Ian Fleming. But I think somewhere in Sony acquiring the rights, they also traded the rights to that screenplay, specifically the Thunderball one, back to MGM. So, long, complicated. But James Cameron worked on the first version of the script, wrote up about 70 pages.
Right. The production started in...
And that was before it even got to Sony. James Cameron worked on that script, and then when they got to Sony, they looked at it and were like, yeah, we're not using this, and claimed they threw it out, but apparently a lot of the plot elements of the film came from that script.
There were a lot of writers who worked on the script of these all three movies, actually, that just never were credited, or their script just never came to be.
Like, the first film was credited to just David Koepp, but apparently was written by like 3 separate people who all worked together. But Columbia, when they went to the Writers Guild of America, only put forth David Koepp's name, and they were like, okay, credit it to David Koepp.
Seems legit.
Underhand business tactics. Well, because I don't think you receive payment if your name's not attached to the script of the film.
Probably not. I wouldn't assume so.
So maybe they did kind of cheat a couple people out of some bucks, but we're not here to discuss the legality of these films or the moral ethics of the companies behind them.
Hey, with great power comes great responsibility.
I knew that line was going to get in here somewhere.
It had to.
They put it in every film, and like 3 times in the first one.
Yeah, because it's pretty much the most famous line from all of Spider-Man. And I read that in the original comic, Spider-Man issue 1 or whatever, was, or I think it was Amazing Fantasy number whatever that Spider-Man first appeared in or something. But it wasn't even Uncle Ben who said that. It was just random narration. And then I think later it was attributed to Uncle Ben. Or everyone just thought it was Ben who said it, and they're like, yeah, it's him.
Totally Ben, guys.
And then Marvel was just like, okay, yeah, it's Ben. Anyway, he says it in this movie, so there you go.
There you go. So I guess now would be a good time to talk about casting. Once they finally got the screenplay together, however they got to that, they wrote it out, they got the plot together, and they were like, we got to cast this.
Right. Obviously, Tobey Maguire plays Peter Parker / Spider-Man. Known for not acting very well. But
yeah, I think Sam Raimi or one of the producers said in one of the DVD little featurettes, like, we all knew Tobey could pull off the nerdy Peter Parker, but could he do Spider-Man? That was the question. And I guess he could. They chose him over many other actors.
Right. He pulled it off pretty well. And, he was known for being a pretty reserved actor, not this sort of charismatic type or whatever, but which
Yeah.
obviously is good for
Peter
Peter
Parker.
Parker, but
It's not Keanu.
he did the third one well, where Peter gets all
Emo?
yeah, I guess,
Where Spider-Man enters his emo stage.
where he becomes an angsty teen. No, no.
He was an angsty teen in the first one. He also, I think there was a rumor on the street that James Franco was in the running for Spider-Man / Peter Parker.
No, I think
But
he was. He was. I don't think it was a rumor. I think he pretty much went in to audition for Spider-Man.
Yeah, but they ended up casting him as Harry Osborn, son of Norman
More
Osborn.
interesting role,
Yeah.
actually, because Harry was more interesting than Peter.
Yeah, Peter's pretty one-dimensional in these films. Maybe two-dimensional if you're optimistic.
I mean, he's a conflicted character, but it's he's not like super hard to understand and deep and stuff. I don't know, but
No, yeah. The Green Goblin / Norman Osborn, Willem Dafoe, probably one of the more well-known actors cast in this film.
right, most of these actors aren't, interestingly enough, aren't known for their roles in like big action movies. I mean, they're well known, but maybe for more drama, thriller movies.
Yeah, and a lot of them are only really known now because of their acting in this trilogy.
Right. I mean, Tobey Maguire, pretty much.
I mean, Willem Dafoe is one of the ones who'd already been around the block a couple times, so he's not really known for his role in Spider-Man.
James Franco, I guess, is more a more well-known name now, but probably back then was sort of new.
No, yeah, James Franco is a pretty big name now. He's also a writer. He went back to college to get a second degree in creative writing. Just recently, actually. Mary Jane Watson, Kristen Dunst, another kind of not really well-known name
No.
at all. And that's kind of the big ones. There's a cameo appearance in every film by Bruce Campbell. And I just want to say, I specifically said every time we saw him come on screen, is that Bruce Campbell? The answer is yes. He's in every single film.
So if you find yourself asking yourself, is that Bruce Campbell? The answer is probably yes. I mean, unless it's clearly Spider-Man on screen, then no. It's not Bruce Campbell.
He was a good friend of Sam Raimi from their work on the Evil Dead trilogy, which I think Sam Raimi is actually more known for his Evil Dead trilogy rather than the Spider-Man trilogy. I mean, not to say he's not known for this. I think he's more known, though, for the Evil Dead trilogy, where Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi worked together and they became good friends. That's why he got the cameo.
Right. Of course, Stan Lee has a cameo in all three. It's a Marvel film, so there you go. His role got progressively more involved. The first one was just some random background cameo. They actually cut out his speaking role. He was going to have a speaking cameo in the first one, but they cut it out. The second one, he saves someone in the background, sort of. And the third one, he talks to Peter.
Yeah, so he's wandering around the city talking to people and always seems to appear wherever Spider-Man is.
So kind of like real life. No.
In the first film, the best character, Bonesaw, who Peter fights in the amateur wrestling match, was played by Macho Man Randy Savage, former WWE wrestler.
You mean actor? I'm just kidding. I'm actually not kidding.
I think everybody at this point knows that the WWE is staged. Let's be honest, no one watches that for the wrestling. They watch it for the story.
Have you seen the South Park episode on that? Don't know
No.
why I'm referencing South Park so much now. I mean, even though this is going out months after the Trust Your Doctor episode where I referenced South Park. Anyway.
And then Jonah Jameson, also known as JJJ. Obviously the best character in these films, played by J.K. Simmons. Not a well-known name, but if you've played Portal 2, you'll recognize him as the voice of Cave Johnson. In the first two films, he actually channels a bit of that Cave Johnson vibe, though I guess it would be the other way around, since Portal 2 didn't come out till like 2009 or 10, I think.
Right.
So that's the casting for the first film.
You're right. Obviously, the big name in the second one, is Alfred Molina as Doc Ock.
Yeah, and basically the only new actor they added. We didn't actually mention who played Aunt May, who's kind of a big character.
Oh,
And
right.
we don't want to cut her out of. It was Rosemary Harris. I was gonna say we don't want to cut her out of her fame, but I guess she's already had that.
I thought she was definitely going to die as we were watching these.
And I
Didn't
didn't.
happen.
And I was correct. She didn't die. So yeah, Alfred Molina played Doc Ock in the second one. Basically the only character they added to the second one who wasn't in the first, now that I think about it. Really? Yeah, actually.
Pretty much.
And then they added a whole bunch more in the third one. Because in the third one they just went off the rails and decided to add like 3 villains.
Right, we had Topher Grace
Yeah, as Venom.
Venom.
/ Eddie Brock. The clear Peter Parker parallel character who we'll talk about more later when we get into the plot. And then we had Thomas Hayden Church as Sandman. He's not really known for anything much now. He's actually known specifically because of his role in Spider-Man 3 mostly. But he's been around the block, acted in some movies. He acted in John Carter, that complete and utter success that Disney put out a couple years back.
And then the other major one, I guess, was Bryce Dallas Howard as Gwen, who in the Spider-Man comics is the initial love interest of Peter Parker when he's in high school, and then it's Mary Jane when he goes to college. So I guess they
flipped it a bit,
right? I mean, the movies are sort of amalgamations of the early Spider-Man stories. So
yeah, I think part of the reason why they flipped it was because they found that the Mary Jane Watson character was more appealing to audiences than the Gwen Stacy character, because Gwen Stacy was more bookish, like Peter. And because they had Peter in the film, they wanted to also mix it up a bit, so they got Mary Jane, who was more kind of a wild child. But they toned it down for the movie, apparently. In the comics, she goes out to parties all the time and drinks when she's in high school, and it's kind of all over the place.
Well, I'm sure she does that in the film, too. I'm just kidding.
I mean, given her terrible childhood, I wouldn't be surprised. So that's kind of the big cast. There was a few other minor characters. Dr. Kurt Connors, played by Dylan Baker, who in the comics becomes the supervillain Lizard.
But in the movies is a completely normal teacher who investigates or studies the Venom symbiote.
For Peter, in scenes that, now that I look back on it, were completely and utterly unnecessary.
Well, there was that one where he informs Peter about the dangers of bonding with Venom, but that was already pretty obvious.
They don't even name Venom in the movie, now that I think about it. We're just going off the cost list. They just name it the symbiote.
Well, there's Venom. The first two all the villains except Venom are early Spider-Man villains. I think in the chronology of the comic books, it's Doc Ock comes first. He's not the very first, but he comes before any of the other ones we see in the films. So it's Doc Ock, and I think Sandman, then Green Goblin, and then Venom.
I think so.
Venom is in the 90s. So he's sort of the newer.
Yeah, Venom's a late addition.
Which I guess is why they added him into the third, but we'll get into that when we get to the third film.
Yeah. Before we go into plot, now that we've finished up casting, I think we wanted to talk a bit about special effects, since these are pretty special effects heavy films.
Right, and sort of just production in general, which started in 2000 for a planned 2001 release of the first film. Obviously, that didn't happen.
Yeah, it didn't come out to 2002.
And interestingly enough, the poster for the first film had the Twin Towers reflected in Spider-Man's eyes, and obviously that was recalled after the 9/11 attacks.
Right, there was also a kind of a specially filmed trailer featuring no footage from the film. A trailer they specially filmed.
To be a trailer.
Yeah, that had a miniature storyline of a helicopter getting attacked and then thrown towards the Twin Towers, but then it gets saved by a web strung between the Twin Towers, kind of as a teaser trailer type thing. They recalled that too after the Twin Towers came down.
Yeah. Not surprisingly.
I actually just found out, just before we started recording, that they also digitally removed the Twin Towers from the first film, because they filmed in New York.
Yeah.
And they filmed before the towers came down. So they went in and digitally removed the towers from the film so no one could see them. Mm-hmm. So that they didn't dredge up any,
Yeah. So, right, they filmed in New York on location, I guess you could say. And they filmed in L.A.,
as a stand-in New York, I guess.
Well, no, it was the LA footage was all studio footage, so.
Yeah, that too.
They didn't just film LA and call it New York.
They do that all the time.
They do.
Toronto seems to be a pretty well known and well used stand-in for New York when you're filming TV and movie. Mostly TV because it's cheaper to film in Toronto than New York. So
production went as planned.
Yeah, production actually went pretty well.
Someone
after all
died
the legal battles
on set. That was
that was
unfortunate, but
the most newsworthy piece.
Right. So I think he was a crane operator.
Yeah, I think he got crushed by a forklift, I think.
Something gruesome like that. Anyway, his family sued Sony for all they were worth. No. They sued them for $60,000.
Yeah, $60,000. Did they get the money? I mean, I would assume they would get the money. It's a pretty open and shut case.
Yeah.
That's kind of the most noteworthy piece of information on production. Willem Dafoe did all of his own stunts. Just want to throw that out there.
A lot of the actors in all three movies did most of their own stunts. Tobey Maguire was on board with a lot of his stunts and practiced yoga and martial arts.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that a lot of the action scenes in the first one, and maybe to a lesser extent the second and third, were influenced by The Matrix, which I guess was a pretty big deal at the time, since it had just come out a few years ago.
Yeah, the second and third would have just come out
like a year after.
Yeah.
And the first one would have just come out like before. But yeah, there's clearly some influence there with, Spider-Man leaning backwards and dodging I think it was glass, actually.
In the first one, there's a very obvious homage to the Neo dodging the bullet scene. Apparently, Toby had some trouble with his back during the filming of the second one. There's a scene where he's trying to get his powers back and he jumps off the building. He goes, I'm back. But then he falls and he lands on the ground. He's like, my back, my back. I think Ivan Raimi suggested the scene, and Sam was like, yeah, that could be pretty funny, but, Toby's had some trouble with his back, so I don't know if he'll be down for it. It might see it as insensitive, so they went to Toby and was like, no, man, that would totally be funny. If they're going to laugh at me, let them laugh, So he did it. And it actually was pretty funny. So now that he had trouble with his back, it takes on a whole double meaning, the scene, but...
So, right.
The first one wasn't as special effects heavy as the second and third, I think, because the villain wasn't as physically imposing, I guess.
Right, the Green Goblin is sort of just human-shaped as opposed to Doc Ock. Anyway, what was interesting to me was that all three movies didn't rely too heavily on computer-generated effects. A lot of them were real... practical effects, I guess they call them, but I've never used that term before.
Yeah, it's practical effects and
digital
effects, which all kind of fall under the umbrella term of visual effects or special effects.
Well, I think it's visual, not digital, even though digital makes more sense.
Maybe they all fall under the umbrella of special effects.
I think that's how it is. But yeah, no, it was pretty interesting that a lot of it was hands-on, actual sets and models they were working with.
Yeah, they built a whole little model of New York to blow up when they needed explosions. But I think the big one that we want to talk about is Doc Ock's arms in the second one. The kind of the big effect, both digital and practical.
Right. I mean, you wouldn't be able to tell in the movie since it's augmented with computer-generated stuff, but they actually made those arms. Those are actual robotic puppets.
Yeah. They're not actually metal, though. They're foam.
Yeah.
They're controlled. I think they had one person controlling each arm, and they had 4 people on each claw.
Something like that.
It was like a puppeteer type situation thing going on.
Right. To traditionally operate, 8-foot arms, they would have had to have, I think, 4 people on each arm, but they developed, they call it the throne. It's a chair with, I guess, sort of joysticks on the arms and little pedals you control with your feet that allow one person to control the entire arm.
Yeah.
And the claws.
Yeah, and apparently the arms themselves weighed like 100 pounds. So.
Right. No, but that's what they were going for. Doc Ock is supposed to have these 100-pound arms on him, and the fact that they actually made the arms for Molina to wear, helped him act, I guess.
Yeah, basically they used the practical arms in every scene that they could. If there was a scene where the arms had to carry Molina, what they did was they digitized the arms and they had a crane kind of carry Molina
Right.
off the ground at the right height, and they added in the arms later.
Yeah.
But
But most of the scenes you'll see in the second one, the arms are actually there. And they look like CGI because obviously they CGI'd over them to make them look better,
yeah,
but they're actually there.
yeah, and the arms actually had a weird effect on the comic book. Actually, I'll say that for later. We'll do a little thing where we talk about where the films had their influence on the comic and vice versa.
Okay.
I feel like that'd be an interesting discussion to throw in later.
Right.
So that was the big one of the second film, and also another big one of the second film was actually the pier scene.
Right. They had to. They went on 8-week hiatus supposedly to construct this pier where the climax of the second movie takes place.
Yeah, Doc Ock's lair, basically. Don't know how nobody finds him there, but this giant set that they ended up destroying. Molina. And then in the third film, obviously Sandman was the most complicated special effect so far.
Right.
Because he's entirely made of sand in a lot of scenes. And it looks good.
Yeah, I read that a lot of the sand was actually real, surprisingly, but it wasn't real sand. It was ground up corn cobs. Because sand can be pretty dangerous, you know. Yeah. So a lot of it obviously was computer generated, but a lot of the real sand, quote unquote, is ground up corn cobs. And the other one obviously is Venom, who
also looked good.
Yeah, obviously the films look better as they go on, you know, because of increasing technology, but there you go. Venom's little tendril things, I guess, they look pretty good. Each one is its own little strand, I guess, which is not pretty hard, but time consuming to do.
Yeah.
Sort of like, you know, in the Life of Pi film where they like animate the tigers, each little hair and stuff. The company that made that actually went bankrupt.
Great. Maybe because they spent so much animating a tiger's hair.
Yeah. No, that's why. It looks great, though.
Should have borrowed Pixar's hair physics that they developed for Brave.
Anyway, there you go.
Yeah. An interesting tidbit is there's a scene where Spider-Man punches through Sandman's chest, and what they did for that scene so they could get the image of the extended Spider-Man arm against the Sandman's chest, so they didn't have to composite both sides of the arm, was they actually used an amputee wrestler to punch Sandman in the chest, and then basically they added on the hand that the wrestler would have been missing on the other side of Sandman, and they just added some special sand effects to make it look like he punched through Sandman.
Yeah, you'd think they'd just do all that on the computer, but apparently Sam Raimi was pretty keen on not having any particular shot in the movie be totally computer generated. I think he's sort of an old school type who... I think he said he didn't want it to look like an animated movie.
Yeah, which is fair.
Even though it's based on a comic. Well, one of his intentions with the trilogy was not to have a comic book style fantasy New York, but at the same time he said that there are fantastical elements to New York, to the real New York. He wanted to focus on those as sort of the middle ground. I don't know, to me it looked like a fantasy New York. It looked like a comic book New York to me.
Well,
with all the bright colors and everything.
That kind of touches on the weird dichotomy in that a lot of people think there's only two ways to make a superhero film. Either you do it super cheesy like comic book style, or you either go the complete opposite, you do the super dark and gritty, Dark Knight trilogy style thing. But I think these films in particular kind of do a good job of walking the line between the two. They obviously touch upon some tricky things, but they don't go so far as to go full fantasy, full comic book silliness in them. And I think that's
that Times Square scene in the first one.
Well, it didn't go fully all the way. I'm not saying there weren't scenes that weren't, kind of silly, but I think that's one of the successes of the Spider-Man trilogy as a whole. Not to say that they're fantastic films or anything, but I think their success comes in. They did a comic book film in a way that was unique to this trilogy.
I don't know. Anyway, we can talk about the camera effects that they used, because those are quite interesting. They either hired a company or they used a certain company's technology to get the shots of Spider-Man swinging through New York, and the company's called Spider Cam. So when I first read that, I was like, oh, they developed new technology specifically for this. No, it's actually the company's name, Spider Cam, and it's basically a system, or what this company does is they've developed a system of suspending cameras from wires and moving those cameras around and stuff as an alternative to cranes, which I guess are the traditional way to do it.
Or helicopters, I guess.
Yeah. But you can, if there's footage you can look at online of there's a camera that looks like it's sort of, what are those things called? Where it's, in the jungle where you like...
Zip line.
Yeah, it's like a camera attached to a zip line, basically. Mm-hmm. Pretty cool. That's how they get the shots of Spider-Man swinging
through the New York.
Yeah.
It's really convenient that all the buildings in New York are close enough together that you can string wires from them. Imagine that in like rural Kansas.
Yeah, I mean, one of the major jokes of the Spider-Man series is that his powers would be completely useless if you didn't live in New York or another big city.
Right.
But actually, it's interesting that you bring the proximity of the buildings to each other up, because the train scene in the second one was filmed in Chicago, because there was no place in New York where the buildings were satisfactorily close enough to the train tracks.
Makes sense.
So they went to Chicago.
Makes sense. An interesting thing actually about the Spider-Man swinging is that Sam Raimi took a lot of care in actually choreographing Spider-Man's flips and moves through the air. He called it a dance in the sky.
Yeah.
And he made it look like Spider-Man was performing sky ballet or whatever your choice of dance is.
Right, and it looks cool. It's not just him swinging in. It's sort of, I guess it adds to Peter Parker's character, because I mean he's just some kid and like pretty much in over his head, and he's just swinging through New York carefree,
surprisingly gracefully.
Yeah, it didn't take long for him to get good at that. But I don't know. I obviously haven't read the original comics, but if you look at, I mean, I've seen some frames. If you look at them, it's sort of just him swinging in, upright. I guess the more practical way to do it.
Yeah. Well, in comics, it's difficult to illustrate motion in the way that you can convey in a film.
Have you seen the new Spider-Man panels? Those look cool.
Well, as film technology improved with time, so did the technology for artists,
of course,
and the comic book industry, which is why comic books look completely different now than they did in the 70s and by extension the 50s as well. Yeah,
interestingly enough, some of the costume design, well, they wanted to base it off, I guess they wanted to base it off the original Spider-Man costume from the 60s, the early 60s, and they did, of course. But I guess some of the costume designers were looking at that web pattern that he has over his suit, and they were looking at the hand pattern, and it's different depending on, I guess, the issue or whatever, or who draw. I mean, it's originally one artist, I think, John Romita, or Peter Ditko, and then it goes to John Romita.
Steve Ditko.
But yeah, it's pretty funny.
I guess now's a good time to actually talk about costuming, because when they were making the Spider-Man outfit, they thought that it looked too flat. So what they did was the webbing, they actually made the webbing 3D.
Yeah.
Because they thought if it was flat, then the costume didn't have that pop on the screen that made it the center of your attention. And those pieces were actually all computer designed and computer cut and then hand sewn onto the outfit, which was one piece, by the way, except for the mask.
Yeah.
And apparently it was difficult for Tobey Maguire to get into, and you required like a team to help him get into it. Because even the boots were part of the one piece.
Yeah.
Except in the third film. There's that humorous scene where he takes the boots off and empties it of sand. But, respectively, they also made Venom's costume much more 3D when Venom becomes his own thing. So, it was interesting to note that they thought that a comic book panel looked too flat. so they made it more interesting.
A lot of the scenes in the movies were actually taken directly from the comic book panels because Sam Raimi apparently was a big fan of Spider-Man. So I think the biggest one, the most noticeable one, is in Spider-Man 2, where he has the Spider-Man suit in the trash can and he's walking away and it's raining, is lifted directly from the comics.
Yeah, and also Mary Jane Watson falling off the bridge in the first film is a direct allusion to the Gwen Stacy death scene in the comics when the Green Goblin throws Gwen Stacy off a bridge. Except in the comics, Gwen Stacy dies because Spider-Man tries to reach her with a web instead of just going down and grabbing her with his body like he does to Mary Jane, and how he also does in the What If comic with, like, what if Gwen Stacy didn't die? So...
The new one, you mean?
No!
The one where she becomes Spider-Woman?
That's a completely different universe.
There's like 20 Spider-Man universes.
There's like 20 Marvel universes. Actually, there's infinitely many Marvel universes, one of which is the film universe. I don't know. So, we also wanted to talk about the original conception for the second and third films because they were pretty drastically different from their final form.
Right. The production actually, they didn't take a break.
No.
They kind of just went straight into the second one and then straight into the third one.
Partially because, hey, the first one made a ton of money. When it came out, it was actually the 7th highest grossing film of all time. It's the 50th now.
It's not anymore, but...
It's the 50th now, but, you know, it's a pretty high honor to have the 7th highest grossing film of all time. If you're in the top 10, basically, you're set.
Yeah, you don't need to work again. No, you probably do. But, yeah. Like the first... Well, the second one had an original script written by some people.
Some people who weren't that important.
That featured a younger Doc Ock. I guess they originally wanted Doc Ock to be in the first one, but they figured, or Sam Raimi figured they had too much story to tell because they knew they wanted the Green Goblin and they also needed the Spider-Man origin story in there. So,
well, it's like the Green Goblin is the Spider-Man villain. Doc Ock is a close second, but when you think of Spider-Man's nemesis, you think Green Goblin.
Isn't it actually the other way around? I mean, I don't know, but
no, I'm pretty sure Green Goblin is first, and then it's Doc Ock because Doc Ock didn't really, his character changed a lot because of this film, which is what I actually wanted to talk about earlier, and which I'll talk about later, which I found out while doing research for this, that Doc Ock was actually a really completely different character in the comics than he was in this movie. But yeah, I'm pretty sure most people think of the Green Goblin.
I don't know.
Or Venom. Or Venom.
No, I wouldn't say Venom.
Nowadays, Venom.
I guess, but...
That's why they put Venom in the third film, was because he was popular. But first, so the second film had a younger Doc Ock, and they had a weird love triangle thing going on with Mary Jane Watson and Peter Parker.
And apparently, Avi Arad pretty much hated that, thankfully.
Yeah, it wouldn't have made a lot of sense. It would have probably felt like they were retreading the first film if they did that. Because they had the love triangle in the first film.
It was a love... Well, they had the villain triangle in the first film, I guess, where they're... I mean, you know, he's sort of Peter's... Not role model. He's his best friend's dad, so... Mm-hmm. That's actually why I liked Green Goblin more than Doc Ock, but...
Yeah, I like Doc Ock more. I feel like that discussion will come up later, too, in how it worked as a trilogy. But yeah, so... They scrapped that idea, but apparently some of the discarded plot lines from that was that, like, the arms that he wore released endorphins, which made him feel good, and he started wearing them on dates with Mary Jane Watson because he liked how he felt with them on, and then he doesn't get fused to the arms till near the climax of the film. They save that fusing to, like, way later in the film. And, you know, it was just all around kind of a weird script, and kind of... would have been weird following the ending of Spider-Man 1, where Peter's like, yeah, can't be with you, Mary Jane. He doesn't tell her why, which would have avoided a lot of the plot of the second film.
Well, even the way they did it was really weird, because, I mean, okay, it's admirable, you know, you want to put your safety of the ones you love over what you want, but then, I mean, you can't just go completely back on it come the next movie. Anyway.
And then the third film... The third film didn't do so well critically and financially, and commercially, I guess, would actually be the term. partially because they tried to cram 3 villains into one film.
Well, Sam Raimi didn't even want Venom, did he?
No, he wanted the Vulture, some other random villain who I think is not that well known at all.
No.
But Avi Arad convinced Raimi that Venom would be a better choice because Venom was more popular, but Raimi didn't want Venom because he thought Venom had no humanity or no interesting characteristics about him that would have made an interesting film.
And he's pretty much right. I mean, the only reason Venom... I mean, I haven't read the comics, obviously. I haven't said that enough. I've only seen the movies. But
neither have I.
The only reason that Venom was interesting to me is that he looks like Spider-Man.
Well...
But, really not really a character there since it's just a symbiote.
Yeah. So what Raimi wanted to do originally was he wanted to focus more on the whole Oswald becoming the new Green Goblin thing, as well as Osborn. Oswald.
Harry.
I'm thinking of the Penguin from Batman. Harry Oswald. Jeez. Wow. Okay, anyway. Harry becoming the new Green Goblin and then have the Sandman as the primary antagonist to kind of bring a more interesting side to the film because it's easier to make the Sandman more of a sympathetic character, which they tried to do with both the Green Goblin and Doc Ock before to varying degrees of success.
Green Goblin, I don't think they tried to make him sympathetic. You could see where he's coming from, but you didn't root for him like you did for Doc Ock in the end. Because he didn't...
I don't think
do anything
making a character sympathetic necessarily means you have to root for them. I think making a character sympathetic basically means, like what you said, you understand where they're coming from. I think when you root for them, you're being empathetic for the character because you feel what they feel.
Same thing.
No, it's not. They're really totally different. But yeah, they kind of failed even more making the Sandman sympathetic partially because of the way the plot was structured in the third film, but also partially because they dedicated a lot of time to the other 2 villains in the film.
Well, I could have imagined, Harry teaming up with Sandman, Venom not even being in it, Harry teaming up with Sandman and then switching sides at the end.
Yeah, probably would have been a better film. I think we both have a lot of ways that the third film could have been a lot better, as a better conclusion to the trilogy as well. But, so those are kind of the original conceptions for the second and third films. Obviously they didn't do that. They scrapped them and rewrote them and made them quote unquote better.
But overall I think I liked the trilogy more than I thought I would. I guess we're kind of getting into territory we wanted to get more to in the end here, but I heard I didn't watch these obviously, the first one when I was a little kid, but I heard the acting was terrible and really it wasn't.
No, not at all.
Tobey Maguire is kind of a flat actor at times, but really not that bad.
No, I think we poked fun at him in the first film for a bit, but he got better as the films went on. I guess that was just coming with the experience of playing the character of Peter Parker in Spider-Man and kind of falling into the role.
Maybe.
It's interesting. Willem Dafoe was talking about how him and Tobey took completely different approaches to acting. Willem takes the script, reads it, and then he just goes with the role, whereas Tobey asks a lot of questions. How should I do this? Should I be doing this? Like, what am I looking for here? Kind of just completely opposite sides of the spectrum. It's also interesting that the guy who played Sandman signed on for the third film before the script was even written. They were like, hey, you want to play Sandman? We don't have a script for you. And he's like, so in.
Tobey Maguire did that too. He signed on for all 3 before he even read the script of the first one.
I guess they were just that confident. So we'll talk about music for a bit since we always do that, and music is a pretty integral part of the visual medium, movies and TV shows.
Yeah, it's pretty generic. Didn't really notice things except the Spider-Man theme sounded like God Bless America. That's all I have to say.
Well, I'll just go a little bit more into the behind the scenes of the music. I wouldn't say it was a particularly memorable score, but I think it was decent. But basically, Danny Elfman scored the first 2 films. You may recognize the name from Nightmare Before Christmas, which is a film I feel like everybody has seen except for me.
No, I haven't seen it either.
Oh, wait, yeah.
I've seen like half of it, actually, so no. He tried to high-five me.
I've seen like 5 minutes, but that doesn't count. So he scored that, and apparently he had some differences with Sam Raimi on the second film. So they got Christopher Young for the third film, someone who had scored a movie for Sam Raimi before, but hadn't really worked closely with him. And it also kind of worked closely with Danny Elfman before. So they felt like he could give a good recreation / continuation of the score.
I guess. I don't know.
I read a really long interview with him where he was talking about how it was really difficult because the studio... He wrote themes for Spider-Man, Aunt May, the Love theme, Mary Jane Watson, but the studio was super set on using all of the Elfman music for a lot of scenes. Like, what he did was he took the Elfman themes and integrated them into his own pieces, but he also wrote unique themes for certain scenes that the studio was like, no, we're going to use Elfman's themes for these, and he can understand why they did it, but he's kind of upset that they didn't use his themes.
Yeah, well, I mean, what did you expect? You're going on for a sequel. Not even a sequel. The third
to use a really dumb coined term that I heard somewhere.
So, I guess, I mean, you have the main themes, the Spider-Man theme, slightly different.
He wrote pretty interesting themes for Sandman and Venom, and I noticed those two themes more than I noticed themes for the Green Goblin or Doc Ock. So I guess there's something to be said about that for the third film. But yeah, that's actually pretty much all I have to say about the music. They used quite a few licensed pieces.
Right, and the second one was a little jarring. The one they used in the third was like, okay, it was interesting. I don't know the names of any of those pieces, by the way.
No, I don't remember.
So look them up
I
yourself.
don't remember what they were, to be honest.
No, overall, not a soundtrack you'd probably listen to outside of watching the movie.
Outside of maybe just the Spider-Man theme, which I thought was nice and was basically the only piece that I can even remember from the film. It's not... Personally, I wouldn't suggest buying the whole soundtrack unless you're a big fan of Danny Elfman's work, or you're like the biggest fan of this movie that's out there. Interesting to note that Danny Elfman would go on to score the Avengers, Age of Ultron.
You mean Avengers?
Yeah, the Avengers.
Pretty sure that's how it's pronounced.
Age of Ultron. So that's pretty much the production for this movie wasn't terribly interesting, unlike Matrix, where they spent 4 months learning martial arts, or Star Wars, where they built all these miniatures to film for the special effects. Spider-Man was just kind of just existed. Production went smoothly. There was no issues, and
that might have something to do with that it was an established franchise already. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Just throwing that idea out there, but.
Well, I guess now we can talk about how it worked as a trilogy, which I suppose will also devolve into a discussion on the films themselves, which villain is better, and how we would have done the third film. Because I think we were talking while the third film was playing about a lot of the things we didn't like and how it could have been done better. So,
right. Well,
I think
what should we talk about first?
Let's start with how it works as a trilogy, because that's important. I think it works as a trilogy.
Yeah, of course. The third one obviously falls flat on multiple different levels, but you can see that they tried to wrap up a lot of what they started in the first one and at the end of the second one.
Right.
In the third one. And I guess one of the big complaints about the third one is that the Harry plot at the end didn't get as much time as it could have.
No, and they kind of pulled a cop-out in resolving that, too.
With killing off Harry?
No, with also erasing his mind for half the film, so they didn't have to deal with it for half the film. But I think, for a film that it's been said that Sam and Toby both expected there would be a fourth film. For a film that expected there to be a fourth one, they did a good job of wrapping up all the plots that they had introduced in the first and second, instead of
I guess
leaving something for the fourth one that never ended up happening. Clearly,
well, it was planned to, and they switched production to The Amazing Spider-Man, which is the reboot that came out in 2012.
Yeah, I don't know why they did that, to be honest. These films were, decent.
Well, are the other ones not? I don't know.
From what I've heard, no.
Yeah, I mean, apparently they're pretty not well received, but...
No, that's why Sony gave the rights to Spider-Man back to Marvel, and he's going to be in the Marvel Cinematic Universe now.
Anyway, I liked the Green Goblin more than Doc Ock because
Doc Ock.
He was more closely intertwined with Peter's life. And Spider-Man is all about, Peter trying to juggle the Spider-Man life with what he really wants to do, which maybe not be Spider-Man. In the end it is, but he was more closely intertwined with Peter himself, so that's why I liked him more.
Well, I liked Doc Ock better because I think he had a better character arc as a villain than Green Goblin did, because Green Goblin's character arc was use this gas, become insane, become villain, whereas Doc Ock, first off, why did he give his arms AI? That's just a really dumb move. But it's...
Actually, sorry to interrupt, but come to think of it, the Green Goblin giving his hoverboard AI is what killed him too. So
great, AI is the real enemy of these movies. But it was like he had a reason to become a villain. He was like, he lost all his funding. He became disgraced because his one invention that was supposed to change the world failed. It killed his wife in the process too. And now he has these arms just grafted onto his back.
Sucks to be him.
Yeah, so his life basically went down the hole. So he was like, I'm gonna do this. And it wasn't even like he was trying to be a villain. He thought he was doing what was right in the name of science.
Yeah, robbing banks.
He was robbing the bank to fund his new, much larger, much more deadly fusion reactor thing
that he was developing in an abandoned dock building. I'm sure there's a name for those buildings.
It's a pier.
Well, the pier is just the...
They referred to that layer as the abandoned pier in the making of...
It's on a pier.
Sure. Not anymore. It's like half in the river. I just think he had a better character arc, and also making him like one of Peter's heroes. Don't know why I went with Steve. One of Peter's heroes who...
Yeah, why do we want to call everyone Steve? Anyway.
Maybe because Steve Ditko. Making him one of Peter's heroes added that element of closeness to his life. And it made it difficult for Peter to see one of his heroes fall. And then, Doc Ock's final line, I will not die a villain. Or
something like that.
I will not die evil.
Eh.
When he overcomes the AI and saves the city from what he admittedly created himself, but I think it's an argument that has no resolution. I think everybody will come out of these films loving their own villain, but I think we can definitively say that Venom wasn't the best villain. Because actually in these movies, Venom had no character development, like at all.
Well, he's more animal than, person to develop, so.
Yeah, even Sandman had more character than Venom, which is saying something because he's made of sand. It's his entire super villain power, made of sand.
Pretty cool power, actually.
Yeah, he's one of the more OP villains.
Anyway, the third one could have been changed for the better, in both of our opinions.
Yeah, in multiple ways. And I think the one that we first came up with when we were watching the film, about an hour in, which felt like 3, we were thinking, maybe they could have done something cool with the whole Venom amplifies your rage. Maybe they could have done a whole mirror plot with Venom and Peter Parker.
Right.
And the other photographer, which is what they felt like they were going for.
Right, I think that was what they were going for, and like most of the third movie, they didn't have time to flesh it out because they were trying to do too many other things. Mm-hmm. So, I guess you can kind of halfway forgive them for that. But what I thought would be really cool is, and I don't know how faithful to the comics this would be, I'm assuming that what they did in the movies is essentially
basically
faithful.
Nothing they did in the movies was faithful to the comics, to be honest.
Well, they took elements of the comics and mashed them all together.
Anyway, continue.
I mean, I'm assuming the plot with what's-his-face getting controlled by Venom after it takes over the suit, Peter pulls it off and controls Brock or whatever his name was. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming that's from the comics. But
I think so. I wouldn't know. I haven't read the comics either.
But what I thought would be cool is if they had a sort of Jekyll and Hyde thing going on where maybe Peter becomes Venom and starts committing crimes or going over the top like he does in what they actually did in the movie, and then doesn't even realize he's doing it, and he's trying to hunt down Venom or something, but it doesn't work because he is Venom.
Yeah, so like a Jekyll and Hyde type thing.
Yeah.
I haven't actually read Jekyll and Hyde. But I feel like they were going for one of those two. Couldn't really tell, but I feel like they got so bogged down in trying to resolve the Harry plot that they had set up in the second film.
Yeah, I do feel like they kind of wrote themselves into a corner with that.
And then also with the Sandman plot they introduced. Maybe, I think if they had nixed Sandman, they could have focused a lot more on Venom and then have Harry as a side antagonist. I think it could have worked.
Or maybe nix Venom and have Harry team up with Sandman to kill Spider-Man.
Yeah, I think basically the general consensus we're seeing here is that they should have at least nixed one of those villains. So I think trying to put 3 in the same film left them a lot of holes to fill that they didn't do very well. I mean, like I said, they kind of
make a
copped
sand pun there, but no.
they kind of they wrote themselves into a corner with the Harry subplot, and then just kind of copped out of addressing it for the whole film by having him lose his memory for most of the film. And then he gets it back because then they're like, wait, that wasn't actually a satisfying resolution. Let's resolve it again. Honestly,
obviously it was intentional. They made him lose his memory, yes, for the purpose of trying to develop the other villains, but also, I guess, just as part of his character. Or he befriends Peter again and then is devastated when he realizes Peter didn't tell him the truth.
Devastated again, I might add.
I guess.
I don't know. I feel like, once again, maybe they could have even nixed the Green Goblin by having him lose his memory in the beginning and just having him stay that way for the rest of the film.
That would have been terrible, though. And Harry
Spider-Man could have teamed up with Sandman in the end. I mean, clearly, in the end, Spider-Man forgave Sandman for what he did because he understood why Sandman was doing it, and he understood that it was an accident and wasn't his fault.
But him teaming up with Harry is just so much better since he was established in the first film, and there was the whole plot about you killed my father, now you die.
I mean, I'm not saying this would be a better film than nixing Sandman and Venom one, but I'm saying it would be a better film than what they gave us.
Maybe. But we'll never know.
No, we won't.
The world may never know.
I don't know, it's just...
How many villains does it take to... How many villain removals does it take to make Spider-Man 3 good? The world may never know.
I don't know, it just... Because I kind of enjoyed the first two films, right? Which is what's weird. I didn't go into this trilogy expecting to enjoy the first two films, and then I didn't really enjoy the third one as much as I enjoyed the first two.
No.
And this was kind of just a letdown. I mean, I'm not saying these were amazing films, but I enjoyed them. I had fun with them, which I think is their whole purpose.
Well, I think the thing is, maybe the reason why our previous trilogies were painful to sit through is because we've seen them before.
Yeah.
And this is pretty much new to us. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, so was Jurassic Park, but both of the second two films of Jurassic Park were just plain awful. So, I don't know. I guess we can talk about, now that we've wrapped that up, I was going to briefly mention that some of the influence on the comics and vice versa is that, one, in the comics, Peter Parker actually builds web shooters and doesn't have that natural web shooting power.
Right.
And the comics adapted that power for Peter Parker after the movies came out and were popular, and then the writers were like, why didn't we think of that? That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I don't really know why they went for him developing a web shooting device. I mean, I know he's supposed to be good at science, but it seems a little implausible.
Also seems like, what kind of powers would he actually have then?
I think he just clings to walls.
He would just be more powerful and cling to walls.
And jumps really high.
And that spider sense, the hilariously inexplicable power that only appears right when the plot can't get itself out of a corner.
Yeah.
Also, like I was saying, Doc Ock is a completely different character in the books. He's like... Peter doesn't know who he is, like, at all. He's not one of his heroes. He just kind of exists, accidentally grafts these arms to himself, and then goes insane.
Yeah.
And then after the movie one, they made the Doc Ock's arms in the comics look a lot more mechanical, because in the comics they didn't look so mechanical and streamlined. They were pretty jank balls. They adopted that, and they also they adopted more of the tragic character, I guess, of Doc Ock into the comics. Because before, I think he was just kind of a ruthless villain who just did things just because he wanted to. He didn't have a wife that died in the comics. They added that in the movie, I guess, to make it more tragic, his fall from grace.
Right, and they gave him a heroic death in the movie. Obviously, in the comics, he doesn't die. Especially not after his first appearance.
I mean, not until recently when he switched consciousnesses with Peter Parker, and then, because he's dying, and then his body dies with Peter Parker's consciousness, and then he basically becomes the new Spider-Man because he's in Peter Parker's body.
Yeah, comics are really weird now.
And then he goes insane because, like, I'm going to be the superior Spider-Man. I'm going to do better than Spider-Man ever did to save the city. You can learn a lot by reading the synopsises on Wikipedia, because even those don't make sense.
The worst one is the Green Lantern, but...
No, the worst one...
That's DC, so...
I was gonna say all the Star Wars Expanded Universe comics. Like that one where Skippy the droid is a Jedi.
That one was cool, though. That one's easy to understand. It's only 3 pages. I read that. Anyway, I guess that kind of leads us into other expanded universe Spider-Man stuff, which I guess expanded universe isn't the right term for it.
No, because this was technically the expanded universe form of...
Right. Well, this is the alternate universe.
True.
The comics, of course, have been around since the 60s. Very complicated. Probably very hard to read all of them because there are so many of them.
Yeah, they keep trying to... Both Marvel and DC recently have been trying to reboot the universes, partially because the superhero films have been getting big again. So,
and because they're so convoluted that if you haven't been following them since the 60s, you won't know where to begin.
But it's like apparently they keep rebooting it, but keeping elements from the previous universes before pre-reboot. And then, but like, not just concepts, like actual characters survive the reboot somehow, just making everything more confusing. And so they keep trying to reboot these things for people to find a new place to jump on, and they just keep making it more confusing.
Yet they reboot their movies for some reason. Well, Sony did with The Amazing Spider-Man.
I don't know.
Which is I
don't know why. That was supposed to be a trilogy too, but after the second one did so poorly, they were like, yeah, no. Apparently the second one suffered from the same thing that the third one did here, which was that they added too many villains.
So they didn't learn their lesson.
No.
Well, those are the other big Spider-Man movies. There's one from the 60s, which I think was direct to TV.
There's also those Turkish knockoffs.
What?
Italian knockoffs, Turkish knockoffs.
No, Italian Spider-Man is it's just sort of a satire joke, right?
Yeah, but I'm talking about legitimate knockoffs.
Oh, okay. There's the Japanese one where he has a leopard robot.
Oh, Japan. That's such a Japanese thing, too.
But like we said way back at the beginning, there are plenty of Spider-Man cartoons, a lot of them with terrifying art styles.
Yeah, not only that, some of them don't even follow the Peter Parker Spider-Man. There's like Spider-Man 2099, which is like future Spider-Man.
That's the other big comic series, I think, is 2099.
Yeah, it's like a future scientist trying to clone Peter Parker, and then he accidentally injects himself with spider DNA or something, I don't know. And then there's Spider-Gwen, which is an alternate universe where Gwen becomes Spider-Woman instead of Peter Parker getting bitten and becomes Spider-Man. In that universe, Peter Parker becomes the Lizard, who's Dr. Kurt Connors in this universe. Yeah, and then there's like all the other Spider characters, like Spider-Woman, Spider-UK, Spider-Ham, the actual completely canon Pig Spider-Man.
Yeah, I thought that was just from the Simpsons movie.
No, completely canon. There's a series right now about this group of Spider-Men/women from alternate universes that go around protecting different universes called Web Warriors, and one of them is Spider-Ham.
There's also the Spider-Man game where you can play as Stan Lee and swing around New York on webs as Stan Lee, wearing a suit for some reason.
Actually, I heard the Spider-Man 2 game was the best Spider-Man game that's ever been made. So, there you go. That's that. I think that's enough Spider-Man.
For one lifetime. Spider-Man is one of the only hyphenated superheroes.
Like Ant-Man. But surprisingly, Batman, Iron Man, Man... Oh, wait, no.
Man?
I was going to say Man-Bat, but I realized that's hyphenated. You know, those Batman and Iron Man aren't hyphenated, but Spider-Man and Ant-Man are.
Superman, I think, is just one word officially.
Yeah, it is. Same with... Yeah, no, Batman and Iron Man are... I think Batman is interchangeable between one and two words, but Iron Man is definitely... Actually, I think Iron Man's interchangeable too.
I don't know.
We don't know anything. Email us at thedoctorofdecadavegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, Spider-Man fan fiction. Wait, no, I take that back. That's a bad idea.
The third one served that purpose. No.
Check us out on YouTube. Triple Play. Check us out on iTunes at Triple Play. Look for a 0.5 episode on this, on some sort of mysterious thing that we haven't decided yet. But it'll happen a month from now. First month of April. This is going out in March.
Week of
First Wednesday of April.
Yeah, check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/3P Podcast. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at 3P Podcast. Follow us on Twitter, and next time we visit the School for Gifted Youngsters. But until then, the end.